So when I first heard BMW were releasing an R12, I was really excited. And then, when I first saw the press shots, I was a little bit disappointed. So for me, this bike is all about the character and the engine. Now look, I love boxer engines, there's no secret about that. And this one feels old school. It's an 1170cc air and oil-cooled 4-stroke boxer that puts out 95 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 110 Newton meters of torque at 6,000 RPM. I loved the engine on this bike. What did you guys think?
Well, I'm going to just go out and say it. This is the first boxer that I have ever ridden. So I was a little nervous at first. But I will say I'm pretty taken with the boxer engine as well. I loved it.
Yeah, they're just fun. They just make me smile. What about you? You weren't, did you like it?
Yeah, it was all right. Like it's got character.
Caddy rider.
Yeah. It's very old school, as you said. It's not like the 1300 GS, which is a more modern feeling boxer.
Definitely not. Yeah.
Old school.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's still air and oil cooled.
Yeah, same here. I do like that.
Yeah. So the other thing I did like is the styling of this bike. I love the sparkly silver colour.
I also loved the sparkly silver, but I didn't love the yellow stripe.
What do you think of it? It's the styling.
Yeah, it was very reminiscent of an 80s boxer, wasn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I think the shape of the tank is definitely more 80s style BMW tank than, say, like the more smooth lines of like the older, /5 series and those sort of things, and also the R90S and those sort of bikes. So they've got 3 different distinct tank shapes, and this one is more like that sort of squarish 80s, like my R65, very similar to that.
One thing I think BMW have nailed with this bike is this stripped back approach to motorcycle.
They do it really well.
Yeah, it reminds me of an old BMW, but then you have a couple of modern creature comforts like ABS and traction control, so you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, there's enough modern tech in the bike to make it modern, but it still feels old.
Exactly, and it's a huge improvement on the old R12C, which you may have forgotten about.
I haven't forgotten because I actually like the look of that bike.
You're insane.
Yeah, well, whatever. So the bike we had the Option 719 parts, and I think they look great. It's got high-grade aluminium components such as the foot pegs and levers, the mirrors, the seat, the rocker covers, the side covers, and that paint job, which I think looks stunning. Love the rear guard on this bike. Big, chunky rear guard, I think looked good. And the other thing that I liked was the side-spoked tubeless rims, and I love the fact that they've put a right-angled valve filler on it.
Yes.
Easy to fill up. So the bike has a typical sort of cruiser dynamic. It's a 19-inch front rim and a 16-inch on the rear.
Yeah, it's a very, very classic naked dynamic. Straight up and down, super relaxed. Handlebars are right where you'd expect them to be.
Yep.
You can sit on that bike and happily cruise along for 1, 2, 3 hours.
How did you find the ergonomics of it?
Same as Lucas, actually. I was thinking like there's a teeny tiny bit of a lean forward, but nothing massive, just enough for you to just be comfortable. The seat was very comfy, had no issues there. And that ergonomics of just seating position.
So the seat height was a really low 754mm. Did you guys like the shape of the seat? Because I loved it. To me, it looked like an old 70s dragster sort of look.
Yeah,
for sure. And that little lip at the back actually serves a purpose. It pushes you just a little bit
forward.
And it's got that little placard on the seat for the Option 719.
It looks good.
It's a nice touch.
Yep.
The headlight was perfect. I thought it looked great, and also it had those beautiful daytime running lights. Worked perfectly.
Yeah, and it was adaptive, which I didn't know until...
Swings through a corner.
Yeah, when you're bored and you swing left and right, and I saw the headlight going like that, which was really cool.
So the thing is, that's the thing, like it's one of those little features that BMW do really well. It's subtle, but it works so well, and that's what I love about this bike. There's all the little electronic elements are there, but there's not too much, and they're not intrusive.
Yeah, it's a no-nonsense approach to modern motorcycling.
So the next up is the twin exhaust. I think they look good, and they sound fabulous.
They've stacked one pipe on top of the other. That always looks good.
Yeah. So it had a really great range of electronics. It had rider modes, which are my favorite rock or roll.
Yeah.
Love the naming.
What did you put it in? I basically leave these bikes in rock.
Do you know what? I actually mixed it up most of the time I was on it. So I tried out both. There was actually, I found a distinct difference between the rock and roll.
Yeah.
But I think I just had fun switching between them because of the name mostly. But certainly in rock mode, you can really feel that movement and that wobble. Yeah. You could really feel it. And I actually had to turn it off when I was using the GoPro because it was moving so much.
So it's got a quick shifter, which is great, but it's a typical boxer quick shifter, which is rubbish.
Yeah.
So I didn't use it for first, second, or third. Only used it for fourth, fifth, and sixth.
He's
I was going to say great.
The other electronics that it has is tire pressure monitoring, heel start assist, and apparently it had heated grips, which I didn't realize until the last day I had it.
And they work well.
When I did realize it had heated grips, I also had heated gloves on at the time, and I was like, screw it, I'm going to use both. Really hot.
Yeah.
Some would say too hot.
Did you have it on 3?
I had on 2 with heated grips.
Wow, okay.
And yeah, those heated grips, like, they work perfectly.
Nice.
I thought the handling was fantastic. Despite having that quite upright position, if you lean your body, the bike responds in a really controlled way.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you?
Yeah, same thing. Like, and even sitting in slow traffic, I just found that weight and that balance, and the fact that weight sits quite low when you're moving, just made the handling so easy at low speed and at higher speeds.
So it doesn't feel like it weighs as much as it does. It's 227 kilos wet. But because that weight is so low, it just handles so well and feels stable.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a few things we didn't like about the bike, and the first up, I reckon BMW must have shares in the ugly phone nav mount company, because that thing is awful. I don't know why it's there as standard. I would get rid of it. I'd add a beeline. But then, if you do that, that whole nav wheel becomes completely redundant.
I was wondering what that was for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it only controls your phone. Now, Tegan, you connected it, the app. How'd that go?
Took a bit. It was a bit of a process getting it connected to the phone. It did work eventually, and once I got it working, it was fine. But yeah, that whole wheel is then, once you're connected, the wheel controls your phone, which I think is like a cool connectivity sort of feature. But I'm sort of with you. I would probably use a beeline or just use my Bluetooth because it is big and it is bulky.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of putting a phone on your handlebars. I think they look awful, particularly on a bike like this.
That vibrates a lot, and I know a lot of phones have issues with vibration, so I would be a bit concerned.
Yeah. One of my complaints was the cruise control. Now, I agree with Ross. It was easy to use, easy to turn on, easy to turn off, and easy to set. However, because you only have an analog clock, it's hard to see exactly what speed you're doing. And if you want to do that finite adjustment, say from 60 to 65, the input is far from instantaneous. And watching that needle and trying to get that precise spot between 60 and 70, it's a little bit challenging.
Okay, Rain Man, I don't know why you're worrying about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's like what most cars have, right? Like, I feel like most cars, cruise control is just an analog clock that you set.
It's easier to read, you know? I just found that this one, and particularly the feedback on the button when you go click, click, click up and you're waiting for the needle to move. But, you know, maybe...
Yeah.
I know the BMW fan club over here is going to disagree with me, but...
Yeah, don't agree at all. I think, you know, like, stick it in cruise control. If you're doing whatever speed it says there, if you want to notch it up a bit, just go a bit quicker. Just, you know, throttle on a bit, mate. I know you probably didn't like the fact that it didn't have a fuel gauge.
Yes, I always struggle with a bike that doesn't have a fuel gauge. Like, I know...
Lucas and I are both going, what the hell's a fuel gauge?
Yeah, exactly. You've got a trip meter for that.
It gives me such anxiety because I'm just like, I'm not used to using the odometer to count, and I don't know how many Ks it does. It's a new bike and we don't have it for that long. So whenever I've done like a couple days worth of riding on this bike, I'm getting anxiety. I'm waiting for the light to come up. I'm searching the manual to make sure I haven't missed that there's a fuel gauge somewhere. Look, I'm sure you get used to it, but it was anxiety ridden for me.
So option 719, it made a lot of sense with the 1300 GS, but on the R12, I'm not really sure if I would like to spend the extra on the 719 package.
See, I reckon the option 719 is the only one to go for, because I actually think the colorways on the other two versions look a bit bland.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the difference between, different riders, different packages.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I find really odd, and BMW have done this on a few bikes, they're not the only brand that's done it, it's keyless, except for the fuel cap and the steering lock, which, by the way, I could not get to work.
That steering lock was a pain. I did eventually figure it out, and it's just mostly that you can't have the handlebars turned fully to the left. It actually has to go back to the right a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a bit finicky. Did take me a while, had to look up the manual, had to look up a couple threads to find people who could explain it to me. But yeah, it's not intuitive.
We disagree on the option 719, but we'll agree on this. The 719 bar end mirrors, although they look great,
They look awesome.
great finish. Could you adjust them?
No, complete lack of adjustment.
Not
I couldn't
at all.
move them at all.
Yeah, same here. And it looks like you can adjust them, but I mean, we were reefing on those
I'm
mirrors.
sure there's a way to adjust them, but
Yeah.
we couldn't do it. Yeah. So that's another thing. We'd probably need to look that up. So the rear suspension, and it's one of the issues a lot of people had with the R18, is that rear shock is really firm.
Yeah, agreed. And this is supposed to be a cruiser, right? Like, why is it so hard?
Yeah.
They actually warned us when we picked it up. He's like,
Really?
it's a firm rear suspension. And boy, oh boy, were they not joking. That is very firm.
So is it adjustable?
It is adjustable. There's a little adjuster on the side there, but there's only 90 mil of travel in both the front and the rear. And if you have a look at that front, that travel in the front looks really short.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have an issue with the travel in the front. I thought the front shocks were fine, but the rear did find a little bit firm. Adjusted it a bit, made it a bit better. But yeah, it's a firm suspension.
Yeah.
Okay, so grin factor. What do you think, Lucas?
I think this bike is the definition of a 7. It's not great, but it's certainly not bad. It's just a bike that you get on and ride. I didn't think it was offensive. I didn't think it was inoffensive. It was just two wheels and an engine.
You know what? I find that offensive.
Wow. Fighting words from the president of the BMW Owners Club. Tegan, what did you think?
Well, okay, I'm probably going to give it an 8. So
Okay.
I kind of agree with what you mean. Like, it does do everything perfectly. I think I'll give it a little extra because it is the first Boxer that I've been on, and I did have a really good time with it. I don't...
But still only an 8.
Only an 8, which is pretty good for me. That's a high rating, considering my highest is a 9. But also, I don't know if there's anything that blew me away on that bike.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the engine. Don't think it blew me away. Looks, I liked it. Didn't blow me away.
That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, but I thoroughly enjoyed riding it. I really loved the handling. I loved that Boxer engine. It was cool. But yeah, an 8 is still a very high rating from me. Okay. So calm down. But okay, the thing I want to know is, you started this by saying that you were super disappointed, but it kind of sounds like you loved everything about this bike.
Yeah, so I do really love the R12. For me, it's a bit like an old school Boxer. And it's very much comparable to a bike that I'm not sure you guys have ridden, but the Moto Guzzi V7 and the Moto Guzzi V9. Those two bikes, it's very similar to those.
Yeah.
And I love those bikes. They're my kind of style. But when I first heard the R12 was being released, I was so excited. And then I saw the first press shots and I went, because in my mind, we were going to see a smaller version of the R18 first edition. Yeah. That's where my head went. I went, okay, so they're going to make something like a BMW R69S or a BMW, one of the early /5 series, or even a Toaster. That's where I'm thinking. And I'm thinking it's going to be a modern version of those bikes. So I was expecting a little bobber, Denfield styled seat. I was expecting some chrome fishtail exhausts.
Yep.
Maybe an exposed shaft drive again. They're the kind of elements that I wanted to see. I thought we were going to see maybe a retake on the old peanut style rocker covers, or some lovely chrome ones. Having ridden it and seen it in the flesh, absolutely loved it. I love my R18, but it's not exactly the most practical bike.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when this was first announced, I was the same. I thought, this is BMW's opportunity to make an R18 light. It's like all the flair of an R18, but the usability of an R9T. But instead, it's more like a bigger R9T with a little bit of a different style.
I'm not sure if it is a bigger R9T because it's the same engine, but it is a much more usable bike than the R18.
Yeah.
So all up, I really did love the R12. And for me, I was smiling from ear to ear when I was riding it. So for me, this is another bike that gets a 10. It's right up there. It's right up there with the Triumph Bonneville T120. It's right up there with the Moto Guzzi V7. They're just my kind of bikes. They're old school. I love the styling. I love the Boxer engine on this one, so it's a 10 for me.
But I mean, we do score differently though.
Yeah, 100%.
So this is a 10 on the scale of how much it makes you smile.
How much it makes me smile.
Yeah, but if it was if it was about smiling, I don't know. I had a neutral face for this, right?
I don't know about that because when you jumped on it, you were like, oh man, this thing's fun.
Yeah, it was fun after getting off the
You're
Diablo.
smiling now talking about it. As consumers, we're really spoilt for choice in the retro section of the market with some cracking bikes, a few of which I've had the chance to ride. And you can see them in this playlist over here, starting with the wonderful Triumph Bonneville T120.